And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 84, the Jared Tenorti episode. Bruins legend, noted tough guy, Jared Tenorti. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. I think Bruins fans would love a little dose of Jared Tenorti these days. It's funny, I was doing a Q&A for Bruins Beat, and a couple of the questions surrounded toughness and the team needing toughness. And he was always kind of that go-to guy, right? Even with Tom Wilson, he was dropping the gloves. Didn't he fight Tom Wilson like less than 24 hours after driving to Boston?
Yeah, it was quite the introduction for Jared Tenorti. Like literally drove up from, I think it was Nashville, I want to say is where they got off.
Drove from Nashville.
Yeah, drove straight there just to fight Tom Wilson. So again, it's almost like Trent Frederick when he used Brendan Tano's face as a speed bag. Like if you want to introduce yourself to Bruins fans, just fight someone. Like,
easy.
It's a pretty set formula, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is really the truth. Like, if you don't have much else, just fight. Like, Bruins fans will love you. You will sell T-shirts. They will cheer your name from the balcony. Even like Tyler Lewington, I think if he'd had like two more fights, people would be like, oh, they need him on the back end more. But anyways, Bruins are now out west. They will play the Kraken on, technically last night. We're recording this a few hours before actually more than a few hours before the game. It's 10 p.m. start time. So we're going to be up late watching this one. But they last played on Monday, President's Day Monday. Big 5-1 win over the Avalanche. One of the best wins of the season for them. But the question comes down to how much stock do you actually put in a middle of the regular season game like this?
A little bit, right? I mean, it's one of those things where it's definitely a step in the right direction. You look at their last couple of games, be it that horrible letdown game at UBS Arena or that win over the Ottawa Senators, where you leave that game just being like, overtime win, you take the points, you move on, survive in advance, but it doesn't make you feel that good. You'd imagine if you wanted a bounce back game, it was going to be that game against Ottawa. So again, to turn around and then I don't think people's expectation were all that high going into that Avalanche game. I think people were kind of expecting the worst, especially with Brad Marchand still out. So for them to do that, to win a game like that, and it wasn't just the fact that the Bruins got 2 points, regardless of how they did it. It wasn't like it was a shootout, 6-5. You had the offense finally breaking through against a good team, and you also, down the other end of the ice, they really locked them down. I mean, the only goal they got was that McKinnon laser on the power play. That was it. So you add in the fact that even though I think the defense did a fantastic job of, keeping the Avalanche to the outside and limiting those grade A looks, still, for Jeremy Swayman, if you're any goalie who leaves a game against the Avalanche with just one goal against, pretty damn good. So, I mean, I think at this point of the season, is it this major turning point? Is it time to get the duck boats ready again? No, of course not, right? We're still in the dog days of February. But in terms of the response you were looking for, it at least offers some optimism that, one, this offense should be closer to breaking out, especially now that Brad Marchand's back in the fold and you're keeping that coil line intact. Defense, we can still have the discussion of whether they should add at the deadline, but they're still better than what they put on over those last couple of games against New York and Ottawa. And Jeremy Swayman looking pretty good. Like, all things considered, since Rouse has been gone, he's really stepped it up and is looking more and more like a number one guy. And, he gets that shootout loss to the Rangers, but as we talked about last week, still a lot to be really encouraged by with that showing against the Rangers and Shesterkin. So plenty of good, takeaways from a game like that, but let's see them build it up a little bit more, right? Like if they come back from this West Coast trip where you're not exactly facing the top brass in the NHL and you come back with 4 or 5 wins or what have you, then that's another step in the right direction where at least you're building some momentum. Hopefully some of these lines are gelling and you're starting to brace yourself for, one, the trade deadline season, and two, just getting ready for the eventual push to the postseason.
Maybe on their way through San Jose, they'll pick up like Tomas Hertl. They'll just kind of like grab him like Marchand did to Robbie Fabry, where he just kind of grabbed him on the bench, took him in. You mentioned Swayman. I think that's the interesting part of this whole run, especially considering, all the season we kind of said we want Swayman to do better against better teams, against playoff teams. And that's sort of what he did against the Avs, right? And then he also has, again, it was a shootout loss, but he still held his own against Shesterkin and was terrific in that Rangers game. Again, last 4 games for Swayman, 3-0-1, .96 goals against average, .960 save percentage. I mean, that is as good as you can get against those teams pretty much. And I think it's an encouraging sign to see him starting to play really well against these really good teams. The other thing, I forget if you mentioned this or not, no Marchand.
Yes.
Bruins don't have Marchand against the Avalanche, which is a big loss, and they put up 5 goals. And David Pastrnak, who had been sort of slow of late, except up until that Ottawa game, comes out with 2 goals. I believe he had an assist as well in that game. So again, a lot to like in the game, but as you said, it's dog days of February. You can't get super high on one game, especially that game, which I think I saw before the game that in matinees the Bruins were 4-0, the Avalanche were like 7-1. So I guess if the Bruins and the Avalanche play a Stanley Cup, it's got to be played like during the day, right? It's got to just happen. It's got to be all afternoon games, weekday, midday games, just what you like.
You're gonna have to finagle the schedule just a little bit, but as long as you tweak it, I really have to like their odds if it's just all classic 1:00 games for the playoffs.
Oh yes, that'll be perfect. So with Marchand coming back, you get a normal first line. You get Marchand and Bergeron together. The one thing though is Jake DeBrusk is now getting reps with Marchand and Bergeron on the top line. And I think a lot of people kind of go, first of all, how is he still here? But second of all, is that who you really want next to them on that top line?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations where you look at the other available candidates. I mean, we've talked about it before. It was one of my bold predictions that they were going to put Oscar Steen up there. It's not even in the mix.
Could.
Yeah, so I mean, they could. Yeah, if DeBrusk eventually gets moved, maybe that's the guy you turn to. But in terms of available options on the lineup, I guess DeBrusk makes the most sense from the perspective of, he's kind of riding a little bit of the hot hand. He's got 2 goals in 2 games. Seems like he's kind of finding his game. Once again, he's kind of going through those peaks and valleys that we've seen from DeBrusk in the past. But you also, on the opposite side of that same coin, he's kind of gelling right now on that 4th line with Nosek and Lazar, and he's, at his natural position at left wing. Is it better just to kind of leave him there as opposed to kind of disrupting kind of the groove he's in? Because as we've seen before, when you shifted him to the weak side on the right wing, it's not like it's exactly, led to his success. I mean, he's been paired with like David Krejci at right wing before and hasn't worked out either, where he's just kind of in that, he's kind of the square peg in the round hole there. It just doesn't fit. So again, I think we've talked about it plenty of times before. I'm sure we mentioned it with the Steen discussion. Like, you put most guys with Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron, you're going to have a pretty damn good line. So who knows? Maybe
I think they could put us with them.
Yeah, maybe not. No, I wouldn't go that far. But all things considered, you could make that argument that even though he may not exactly fit there, that's still going to be a capable top line, effective line. If we, if the Bruins commit to this for a week or so and DeBrusk comes out of it with, 3 goals or what have you, and it's raising his stock, it's giving you at least a competent top 6 line for the time being, and it raises, DeBrusk stock where a few weeks down the road, maybe he gets moved and it, you get a better return from, as opposed to, I don't know, a 2nd round pick or something. If you get an actual player value back and it's helped by the fact that you kind of gave him this opportunity to kind of roll with this top line, then it seems like it satisfies all parties, right? Because as we talked about, I think every single time DeBrusk has had a good game or a good stretch, it helps everyone involved when he's playing well. Like, the Bruins get production, they're raising his stock to hopefully get a better piece in return, and it accelerates, you would think, DeBrusk eventually getting moved, is what he requested back in November. So if he plays well, if that top line plays well with him in that spot, everyone stands to benefit.
I am curious if Don kind of gives Bruce a nudge. Like, hey, can you put DeBrusk on the top and just kind of like raise his value a bit? Gets higher numbers. He gets to play with Marchand and Bergeron. We get to say that he played with Marchand and Bergeron. Obviously, teams are not dumb. But, for instance, I believe the Fourth Period reported that San Jose was interested in Jake DeBrusk. So that's another thing. You get to go to San Jose and have him be on that top line. I think that's a legit thing. I did some research into this and DeBrusk on the top line. And since 2019-20, Corsi for percentage of 65.35, which is pretty good. Again, that's in 50 minutes of total time over the course of 3 years. So again, this is all numbers, take with a grain of salt. 2 goals for, 3 goals against. expected goals for of 2.24, and expected goals against of 1.41. So again, a very tiny sample size. I don't expect this to be very good, but the numbers again in the past have not been terrible. So there's no reason to say that this is going to be, immediately be horrible. But there's a chance that it could be okay. I think they could benefit from this. Should be interesting to see. Not pick guy on the top line. Again, I like Steen. I don't know why they just sent him to Providence the way they did. He was sent because they felt his game stalled, correct?
Pretty much, yeah. Which you would think that it's a pretty quick antidote or a quick fix to putting him with Marchand and Bergeron to give him a bit of a boost. But I mean, I guess I could see the argument there in terms of you don't want to disrupt one. Taylor Hall is playing very well, so I think you have to keep him with Pasta right now. I think that's essential. And then I guess the quickest, easiest fix would be putting Craig Smith back on that top line, but I think the Bruins really want to commit to see how this third line kind of gels with Frederick, Coyle, and Smith, because even if maybe they're not lighting up the stat sheet, I think you look at the eye test, the optics of how well they're playing. That's a line that could be a difference maker in the playoffs when it comes to possessing the puck, throwing their weight around. I mean, look, for example, that first goal from Pastrnak on Monday against Colorado, where they didn't factor into the scoring, but that whole sequence started because they were holding on to the puck for over a minute in the offensive zone. So if you're able to keep that line together and they continue to get traction, and you have to imagine whether it's Frederick, who had a couple of grade A looks against Colorado, if he starts burying those chances and raises his value, if Craig Smith, who seems like he's been due for a goal for months now, if he starts scoring, if they keep playing, sticking to their game, that third line, sooner or later those chances are going to convert. Not to say that they're going to be a line that's going to be pantsing the opposition. It's not going to be like the Tampa Bay third line of Goudreau and Coleman and those guys, right? But if they can still be a very effective third line, kind of similar to what it was in 2019, you got something cooking there. So I understand maybe the hesitancy to put Smith back up there, but whether it's DeBrusk right now, Steen, or maybe it's someone you acquire at the deadline, you have to imagine there's still kind of that hole there in that top line that you have to fill, because right now I don't really think you want to disrupt that middle six grouping.
No, I agree. Do you remember? This is a long time ago. Maybe you've seen the video. Maybe you haven't. I forget what it was just like a random ice sheet, like a rink, and I don't even know where. And there was like it looked like the thing that they do, that sport where you like shovel it along. Little curling, like it looks like a puck, but it's really fat. And do you remember the video where the guy comes in and just takes a slap shot with it, and it goes straight through the net, goes through the glass, and then lights the snack shack on fire? Have you seen this video?
I don't believe so, but it sounds...
well, for people who have...
You painted a very vivid picture, though, Evan.
A very vivid picture. That's how I imagine Craig Smith's first goal to go in. It's going to he's going to shoot it like through the net. It's going to go through like the stands. It's going to take out everything in its path.
I mean, he's tried his damnedest. I mean, that guy is like shot from literally every possible angle. It's like that movie Wanted with James McAvoy. He's just like banking it off every single like corner, anything, try to get a goal. So you have to imagine that. I mean, he's a guy that's already kind of been known for scoring in bunches. So if that line just starts contributing a bit more, all of a sudden, I think you have even more incentive for Cassidy to keep on keeping that line together.
It's like when Dan Heatley was shooting from the corner.
Yes, exactly.
Like anything towards the net. But the Filip Forsberg trade rumors are in full swing, which is just exactly what you expected, right?
Yeah.
It's funny when the Predators were here like a month ago and they were one of the best teams in hockey. They've fallen since. They're like fourth in the Central now, I think, and they've kind of hit a rut. I'm right on this, right? I think
I believe they beat the Panthers recently, which is obviously a big deal, but they lost 4 in a row before that.
Yeah. Good.
So I mean, I don't even know what they're doing, because I think we were all in agreement last year that you looked at that team. They didn't really have a loaded prospect pool. You don't really expect them to go anywhere. Last year's kind of the year to start selling guys off, right? I mean, if you traded Forsberg with a year of control, you get a huge return. And, you had guys like Ekholm, which we talked about for about 40 episodes of this podcast.
Oh, I think the whole time.
So, I mean, the fact that they go out, they don't sell, they then re-sign Ekholm and a few other guys, and now they get to this point where, again, kind of up and down, but you kind of looked at the way they played. That's a team that, if they get into the playoffs, wouldn't surprise me if they, punch and grinded their way through a couple of rounds. I mean, they're a pretty tough physical team. So to now all of a sudden be like, well, yeah, we're gonna move our far and away our best offensive player. It's like, all right, what exactly are we doing here?
Yeah, I'm interested in this because again, UC Soros has the potential, as you said, to like get hot and carry them through playoff series. He was an all-star and everything. So Forsberg's a target. He has a cap hit of $6 million per year. He's a UFA at the end of this year, which is I think why they're kind of dumping him. I think aside from the Bruins, I think this does hit at a bigger point. The teams value, and I don't think it's anything new, but they value top four left shot defensemen way more than they value wingers. I think the Predators look at this, and granted, I'm not a Predators expert, so there's no inside information.
Guy in Nashville punching his radio right now.
Yes, just like the Islander fans.
I don't know why they're listening to us, but yeah.
Yeah, what are you doing? Listen somewhere else. Just kidding. If you're from Nashville, we love you. But I think it kind of hits the point of top four left shot defensemen are much more important in the sense that a guy like Ekholm is not going to come along all the time. Whereas a potential first line right wing in Filip Forsberg, I think the Predators look at him and say, granted, are we going to find the next Forsberg? Probably not. But we can find someone who can, put up consistent production, whereas we can't find someone who plays the way Ekholm does. I think maybe that's why they are kind of opting to sell Forsberg but keep Ekholm, which doesn't make sense because you could have done a full rebuild with those two guys. You could have got a haul last year. But in terms of the Bruins, again, the Bruins have been rumored to be in on some wingers. I think if Forsberg were to come here, it would have to be with a wink, wink, nod that he is going to stay and re-sign. I would guess that he would go on the top line with Marchand and Bergeron.
Yeah, I mean, even though he's a right shot, even though he's a left wing. So we talked about this, I think, yesterday when this news first broke. Like, is it the perfect fit? Probably not. But I'm also willing to overlook all of that because Filip Forsberg is filthy. That guy is
filthy.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for all the guys we've talked about, whether it be JT Miller, Hurdle, Conor Garland, all these guys we've mentioned, Claude Giroux, in terms of pure talent, in terms of scoring, Forsberg's your guy. He's a guy who I think is on pace for, like 44 goals and 95 points this year. I don't think he's even and I think he's even missed some time along the way.
He's 44 and 38 right now.
Yeah, so legit player. A guy that if you're looking for that vacancy on that top line, as much as I think we've talked before about the fact that, is Erik Haula the guy you want at 2C going into playoffs? Well, if your top six is then Marchand, Bergeron, Forsberg, Hall, Haula, Pasternak, you could probably overlook it, at least for this 1 year. I still think you've got to address that vacancy in the coming years down the middle, whether that's spending big for someone else or hopefully you draft someone down the line. So
that would help.
Yes, that would help out quite a bit. So if you're the Bruins, again, it's going to also depend on who's available. We could be looking at this deadline in a few weeks from now. And even though probably the Bruins would like to add down the middle, if Vancouver's not moving JT Miller, which seems like they're kind of hesitant to do. You look like they want to move more of a guy like Besser or Garland before that. And if Tomas Hertl re-signs with San Jose, which seems like that could be a kind of a Kreider situation, which is kind of the ultimatum of, all right, are you signing or not? Because if not, we're going to move you. But worked out well for New York to do that with Kreider, so who knows what Hertl does. So if we get to that point and all those guys are off the table and you're looking at I don't know, Andrew Kopp or one of these other guys and other guy down the middle you add, maybe you're like, well, we'll have to still do some major, cap gymnastics down the road to probably add a center at the offseason. But if a guy like Forsberg falls in our lap and it's a guy that we have to give quite a bit to get, but adds a legit 30, 35 goal scorer to our lineup, then maybe you do that. Before Eichel showed up, Las Vegas kind of thrived after just having no center. For not a legit center. So not to say that that's a sustainable path. And what do you know? They have Eichel now, so they don't have to worry about it. But if you're looking for best talent available, Forsberg's probably your guy. It's just for the Bruins, you have to assess what the price is, how much you're going to have to pay for him, because I feel like he's going to be a guy that's going to be $9.5, $10 million a year.
Yeah, especially with the year he's having this year.
Yeah, exactly. So it's complicated to kind of sort through exactly what the market's going to be. And I still think probably center is the priority. But if you're the Bruins and you're looking to add any sort of offense, would not be surprised if they're kicking the tires on a guy like Forsberg. He's that good.
It's funny, Hockey Reference has him listed as a center, but obviously he's been playing the wing this year. So I don't know if he can play center. Then that's maybe even worth it more. Yeah. But again, he hasn't played center this year. The other thing is, and you mentioned what the Bruins would have to pay him per year, around $9 million. Not only would you have to pay a ton for him contractually, you'd have to pay a lot in return for him in a trade. And I think that's another thing, another obstacle that you'd have to jump over in this, because it feels like a comp to Forsberg could potentially be a prospect like Fabian Lysell, or, or a first round pick or other prospects. I'm curious what you think it would take to get a guy like Forsberg.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on just how much Nashville's kind of setting that market. Like, I would be kind of surprised if like Lysell Lori is the deciding factor there. If you're talking about a guy like JT Miller or Garland who are under term for a long time, or Chikrin, obviously, then I think that's no brainer. But I kind of, when you look at rentals, especially, and the leverage teams have, unless you're in a true bidding war for a team, they're willing to go over the top. I don't see how maybe a guy like Lysell is the real asking price there. I'm sure a team will ask for it at first, but I don't know why the Bruins would budge on it. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Mark Stone trade, right? Where when he was, put up for grabs, people were like, oh my God, it's going to cost so much. Like, it's going to be a haul. Bruins, I mean, at that point, it was, Studnicka and these guys, like, we can't move Studnicka. We can't. He's the blue chip guy. But then you look at what he got traded for, and of course, yeah, his first round pick and a few other guys, but however you say his name, Benstrom. Yeah, he's in the NHL now. He's like a everyday guy, but is he the blue chip prospect? Like, it's one of those ones where it's like, oh,
Mark Stone was worth more.
Yeah, exactly. And when that trade first came through, even before we knew what exactly that defenseman was going to be, it wasn't like, oh wow, they gave up a haul. It's like, oh, this is about right. Top 5 prospect in their system, first round pick, few other bodies for a rental, a 1-year guy that they had to eventually re-sign. So I don't know if exactly a guy like Lysell is going to be moved in a deal like that, especially if you don't know if he's going to sign or not. And maybe it changes if you're able to get an agreement as part of the deal. Maybe that changes things. But if you're going into it just with the anticipation of getting him on board for a cup run, hopefully you re-sign him afterwards. If Nashville is holding firm on a guy like Lysell, I think you have to just walk away because it's not worth it then. If you're convincing me you get a piece for the future like a Miller and Garland or Chikrin or what have you, then maybe do a double take where you look at a guy you can build for going forward. But it's kind of the pros and cons of acquiring a rental like a Hurdle or Forsberg, where it's, yeah, there's a risk they fly at the end of the year and you wasted a first round pick for nothing. But if you give up that first round pick and you have this piece for this year and for the future, it's a risk worth taking. So I don't know if a guy like Lysell is exactly going to be the asking price, but market's weird, man. Last year, if you told me David Savard was going for a first and a third, I'd say you were crazy. And that's what Tampa gave up for him. And again, that's a team that was desperate to go over the top. So who knows what a team like Florida is going to do? Yeah. Who knows what a team like Florida is going to do? Is like Florida going to trade for, give up Spencer Knight for Chikrin? Wouldn't surprise me, right? Like those, I feel like a team like that is going to be desperate enough to move some of these pieces they have.
Yeah, could you just say like Spencer Knight's going back to college playing at ASU?
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't feel though like the Bruins are in on rentals. It feels like they're going to be in on guys who have term or who at least, as I said, give the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, I'm going to sign here after this is done. And again, Forsberg, I don't know. Again, with these guys, it's hard to tell if they like Boston or not. Taylor Hall was always a Boston guy, so that felt more like a sure thing. You also didn't give up much to get him.
Yeah.
So that might be another comp. I mean, again, Taylor Hall's value was extremely low last year. He also basically said, I only want to go to Boston.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why you only give up Bjork in a second. You're not doing that with Forsberg, but maybe you're right. Maybe Lysell isn't the be-all, end-all of the deal, which would be nice. Again, if it was like DeBrusk even, that'd be great.
Exactly. Yeah. I think if you're acquiring a rental for the Bruins, you're only doing it if you've done your homework of, maybe it's not a sure deal that they're going to sign a contract right after you get traded for them. But you heard Hall all throughout kind of this stretch before he officially re-signed, talking about how much he loved Boston, appreciated it. I feel like they're doing their homework, and you're not acquiring a pending free agent unless you know that it's a guy that'd be interested in staying here long term. Like, I don't think you're giving up a first. It's almost like the Rick Nash thing where, again, they gave up that first, gave up a lot for him, a guy like Lindgren, who they could sure use now. But I believe, the Bruins were like pretty candid about that it wasn't for the concussions. They viewed him as a long-term kind of piece in this window to kind of pair with Krejci going forward. It just, unfortunately, the concussion issues made him retire. So I don't think they're giving up a lot for a rental if they don't think it's a guy that they can add, not just this year, but in the years ahead.
Imagine Krejci's looking over. Imagine the Bruins get Forsberg. He's looking over going, you got Forsberg, you got Taylor Hall now, all after I leave. Ridiculous.
Still got till March 21st.
I know, right?
Regular season ends on March 9th in the Czech Extraliga. Don't forget.
So there you go. He might be coming back. You have to go through, that'd be jumping through waivers and everything. Hey, I mean, there's ways you could make it work.
I'm just saying, you get Forsberg. David Krejci comes back. A team like Arizona claims him. You trade a 4th-round pick for him. You got David Krejci with Hall and Pasternak. You got Forsberg. I'm just saying.
So then in that case,
I'm joking.
We're on this.
I'm joking.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Nice one on that. There was a now that you're on this, then if that was your top 6, we're getting people so riled up with this. But if it was Marchand, Bergeron, Forsberg, Hall, Krejci, Pasternak, I would comfortably say that's a Stanley Cup contender. I would have no issue saying that because that is a ridiculous top 6.
That's a wagon of a top 6. I mean, again, that's why
I don't know how you make it work with cap.
This up. Yeah, you have to do some major cap gymnastics, but yeah, it'd be interesting in the offseason if you are intent on actually re-signing a guy like that, but you never know. I'm just saying, March 9th, see how far HC Olamuk, however you say that. I bet I butchered that pronunciation, but see how far they go.
Hey, you never know. On D, a guy who the Bruins have been interested in, you wrote about this, is Hampus Lindholm of the Anaheim Ducks, who feels like he's been on the trade block for like years
forever.
Now. Yeah, I think this is like one of those names like, who's another one who's always been on the trade block? Well, Jack Eichel for a long time. Ekholm was another. It felt like they were on forever. But Hampus Lindholm, again, $5.205 million cap hit. He's a UFA at the end of the year. Stable top 4 left shot defenseman. Defensively his numbers aren't amazing this year in Anaheim, but he's also in Anaheim, who was a team that everyone loved at first and now has sort of fallen of late. They're kind of on that teeter. They're kind of like Nashville, teetering on, do we sell? Do we stand pat? Do we buy? But in the event that Lindholm does go, how good of a fit would it be here?
I mean, he would fit in terms of maybe just stabilizing that top 4, because even though maybe he's still a skilled, point-producing guy, big body, 6'4", not exactly known as a thumper. He's not like Ekholm, who, again, was offensively talented, but also could, bring some muscle to it. I mean, that's a guy that was tough in the corners, would really shut down players in the slot. I mean, that was like kind of the perfect fit there. So, not Ekholm, Lindholm, too many sweets. Lindholm's not nearly as maybe nasty in that regard, but still, he's a big body, minutes eater. If that's a guy where you put him next to Brendan Carlo and your top 4 for the next 4 or 5 years is, Grizzly McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, you're feeling a lot better about yourself in terms of just the personnel you have there. But one, it's going to come down to, again, the risk assessment of whether or not you want to, bring in a guy in Lindholm who it seemed like, as you said, a few weeks ago, Ducks weren't even going to sell, and they may not even, but it seems like everything you've heard out in Anaheim, and I think there was a piece in The Athletic where they talked to Lindholm about his career. It seems like he's very intent on going to free agency and getting paid. So those are the guys maybe you're a little bit hesitant about that. Even if you acquire him and he has a great time here, still is going to go to free agency and see who's going to throw the bag at him, right? So there's that risk. And again, between that, it's all going to come down to, I think, for the Bruins, what you identify as the key thing you need to add to this roster, because you can't get you can't get David Krejci off waivers and a legit top 6 wing and a top 4 D. I'm joking. You can't do all those things all within the span of a couple of days with the assets that you have, obviously. So I think if it's acquiring one impact top 6 guy or top 4 D, you have to decide what exactly is the best fit there. And if you come out of it and you focus your attention on getting a Hurdle or a Garland or someone like that really bolsters your scoring, and then you get, I don't know, a Justin Braun, like a third pairing kind of just defense only older guy. Yeah, a guy like that who is a rental, but you're not going to give up that much, and at the very least solidifies the bottom of your decor. Maybe that's the move you take, is kind of a half measure to bolster your lineup a little bit. So it's all going to come down, I think, for the Bruins to identifying what exactly is the main area of need, because it drives people crazy, because the Bruins will have a game like Carolina where you point to their expected goals and be like, listen, they're tops in the league, and then they give up 4 or 5 goals and people lose their minds. But you have to look at just what's more pressing, either that or scoring, which on paper it seemed like is going to be the biggest Achilles heel, is just needing one more extra talented playmaker somewhere in that lineup.
What's funny is Lindholm, again, the left side for the Bruins is interesting because there's so many options. Like the right side, there isn't. But on the left, you've got Grzelcyk, Riley, Forbert, Vakanainen, John Moore. When he wasn't hurt, Jakub Zboril. You have all these options. And, obviously Lindholm would play over them, play over at least everybody but Grzelcyk. But it's an interesting thing because it's like who would get bumped down? Whereas on the right side, I think it's more clear that Clifton would be the guy. The other thing is I feel like Lindholm is a Maple Leaf through and through, and here's why. First of all, Muzzin goes on the LTIR, so now you got space. And the Leafs are so adamant about getting a defenseman. They have been forever, this number one defenseman, that they overpay these like borderline top 2, mainly like second pairing left shot defenseman like a Jake Muzzin, and basically turn him into he's our number 1, number 2 guy. Feels like they're going to do the same with Lindholm. So I almost feel like Toronto would be the team that would get Lindholm. I think if I have any bold deadline prediction, it would be like Hampus Lindholm will go to the Maple Leafs. I mean,
they're going to need something because poor Campbell is going to get ground into dust there. It happens every single year where they ride these goalies that aren't proven for these reps into the ground, and they don't really have a good decor in front of them anyway. So that team's going to need some help somewhere.
I think I was reading somewhere today, like, Jack Campbell, he's finally Toronto's goalie. He's the guy. And it's like, let's get past the first round of the playoffs first.
And it's one of those things, too, where it's like you're knocking this guy who, like, it seems like a pretty talented goalie. He's got you good returns. But look at Freddie Anderson. Like, maybe have a good defense and don't grind these guys into dust in the regular season as you stack up points.
Crazy how that works. I didn't realize that's how, it's crazy. It's like almost like every other team's been doing this. Anyways, Connor, what can people look forward to over at Boston Sports Journal?
Evan, will have continued coverage throughout this Bruins road trip out on the West Coast. We'll be up late for all of these games, giving you game recaps, features, breakdowns, working on a couple of other features throughout the next couple of weeks that we're excited to share. So you can find all that stuff on bostonsportsjournal.com. So subscribe there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. What's funny is the Bruins are on a West Coast road trip as I take a West Coast road trip. So crazy how that works. I will not be at the games, though, unfortunately. I will be avoiding ski injuries in Park City, Utah, hopefully. Can't have
Godspeed.
Someone brought up skiing to me on Twitter once recently, and someone replied, like, that's a really sore subject for Evan. Why'd you do that? And I was like, right? Like, come on. I got banged up that last time. Anyways, I will try my best. Connor, always a pleasure. That's Conor Ryan, Boston Sports Journal, Evan Marinofsky. You Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your day.